Hey guys, welcome back to day 4 of 10 albums over 10 days, hopping on this Facebook trend and turning it into content. These are albums that had a huge impact on me. If you missed the last 3 days, there's a link in the description to a playlist so you can catch up. And I want you guys to play along too, so go ahead and drop an album, one for each video, one for each day, that had a huge impact on you in the comments below. All right, 20 years old. In college, smoking way too much weed. I thought Metallica was the greatest band to have ever existed, hands down, no contest, with the exception of Steve Vai being the greatest guitar player of all time. I meet my buddy Eddie, who's 2 years younger than me. He's a drummer, and he's a really cool guy. He's a badass. We get to talking. I tell him I'm into metal, and he is like, "Oh, have you heard of this band, this band, this band?" I'm like, "No, I'm not familiar at all." He's like, "Hold up, bro." A few days later, he hands me 3 burned CDs, one of which is Blackwater Park. Now, I did not immediately listen to those CDs, and I have always had a bad habit of when people are like, "Oh, dude, you gotta check this out," be like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that," and I never do that. Gotten a lot better about that. Thank you, Song Suggestion Friday. Several months later, I get suspended from college. Again, smoked way too much weed. I'm really down on myself because of a girl. I'm like absolutely in a totally shitty place. And I'm kicked out of my parents' house, so I'm trying to figure out what the fuck I'm gonna do with myself. I would say it is the lowest point I've ever been to in my life. So I dig through Eddie's CDs, because I ain't got shit else to do, and I pop in Blackwater Park. I'm listening to the first track, Leper Affinity. At first, I find it far too aggressive and abrasive, with the really deep, aggressive death metal growls, which I really was not into growls at all during that time. The weird scales, which I wasn't a huge fan of, and the really hard dissonance. That and on Leper Affinity, there's these really prolonged stretches of double kick, which I was kind of like getting bored with a little bit. Didn't have much of a groove to it, although it was absolutely animalistically brutal. As I listened on and listened closer and smoked more weed, I started to notice the finer details in the production, the breadth of the soundscapes on this album, and just how hypnotic these melodies were. I was starting to fall in love with this album. Then I moved on to Damnation, and I fell in love with this band. I was like, sold. I was pleasantly surprised by the Latin-inspired grooves that are sprinkled throughout this album. There is way more groove on this album than you would expect from a band who opens up an album so fucking brutally. The thing I realized later that I loved the most was how melody crafting, the heart-melting melodies, and just the composition in general was prioritized over technical proficiency, being as masterful at the instrument as you could, and showing everyone that you were. This album is so dark, so groovy, so trance-inducing. It is very obvious to anyone who's listened to my recent writing, like within the last few years, that this band has had a huge impact on my writing, and this album probably more so than any of their other albums. They captured on this record such an atmospheric melancholy that I didn't know was possible to do with metal. They did such a nuanced group of emotions that I didn't realize could be done. This album opened my mind to completely new ways of making and enjoying music. And this album cemented my favorite way to write bass for metal. They did such an awesome job. Martin Mendez is such a badass. The tone is very warm with a very wide bottom. I would not be shocked if they actually used a stereo spreader on the bass, but I would love to know how they accomplished that. And the bass played a simple but tasteful melody that wasn't exclusively tied to the guitar. It very much has a prominent place on this album. This album would not be the same without it. All right, some track highlights. Bleak, possibly my favorite Opeth song. I'm not 100% sure. The chorus in this song touched my heart in a way that I responded to so strongly. And then the bridge dropping out to this like really spooky sounding acoustic piece, going to this kind of beautiful jazz thing, and then getting a little bit more aggressive and intent, and then ramp up into these really aggressive electric guitars, going basically power chord on the root with your fifth, and then walk that fifth up to the minor sixth, then the major sixth, and then the minor sixth back down to the fifth. It's like, oh, oh, you fucking bastard. And then the part in the bridge that goes right back before the chorus is possibly my favorite fucking Opeth moment ever. It's so good. The many counterpointing melodies that happen there, the simple drum groove that perfectly complements everything. Like, and again, a great example of the bass needing to be there, otherwise this part falls apart. The Drapery Falls has the best intro slash outro of possibly any fucking song that I know, with the exception of maybe Dream Theater's Ministry of Souls, but holy shit. Hypnotic, dark yet bright at the same time, demented as fuck. I'd never heard a bass note get bent in metal before, and I didn't realize what it was until I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I did the math, I'm like, oh my god, he's bending the bass note, and it's like the best fucking bass bend I've ever heard in my life. The rest of the song is great too. As a matter of fact, I kind of lift one portion of this track for one of our tracks on Crusade, but don't tell anybody. Dirge for November. This was my favorite track on this album when I was first listening to it, but that got moved back a little bit. That fucking intro with just acoustic guitar and Michael singing, and then when it melts, no, and then the acoustic riff comes in and that jazz guitar, holy shit, the sweetest jazz guitar. So gentle, so fragile, so sad, so sweet. Like, oh my god. And the rest of the song fucking slaps too. Maybe a little bit too much double kick, but I don't even give a shit. It's just, it is such a mood. It is such a fucking mood. And going in between all of these very baroque chords and just fucking pounding you in the face. And lastly, Blackwater Park. I've already talked about this song on Song Suggestion Friday, yet again. It's absolutely incredible. It's the title track of the album. It's the longest song on the album. It goes to so many places. And that intro is so fucking brutal and emotional at the same time. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on the album Blackwater Park. What do you guys think of Blackwater Park? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know your fourth album that had a huge impact on you in the comments below. And if you missed the previous 3 days, there's a link in the description to the playlist. You can check those out and get caught up. And I will see you bastards tomorrow. Rock on!